we do not form our policies according to the members' views.
It's
So if
for
you,
what you stand for.
If you agree with what AFRIFORUM stands for, and if you support our vision, then you can become a member, and you don't have to agree with absolutely everything. AFRIFORUM is opposed to discrimination in the past as well as in the present. And then by extension as well as in the future. So saying that you can't fix injustice from the past by instituting opposite injustice in the present. If someone asks me about apartheid, the first emotion or the first thought that comes to my mind is simply distance. Because I was born in 1999. And apartheid officially, let's say, it ended in 1994, just to put a date to it.
I mean, AFRIFORUM could easily just be, clearly come out and say we are for everyone in South Africa. Is AFRIFORUM racist? Fellow citizens, welcome to another episode of Citizens Talk, where we have the conversations that matter. You'll remember that we said we are going to be bringing you guests who are going to help us understand what many other South Africans out there are doing to make a difference. We keep repeating the same message. You cannot be a bystander. Building a better South Africa is going to require all of us to do what we can to make a difference. One of the organizations that has caught our eyes in terms of the activities they are driving out there, you see them in the news, is AFRIFORUM. And in today's episode of Citizens Talk, I've got a representative of AFRIFORUM here so that they can talk to us about the organization and what they are doing, how they are doing it, so that hopefully you are inspired to start making a difference wherever you are. My guest today is Louis Boshoff of AFRIFORUM. Welcome to Citizens Talk, Louis.
Good afternoon, Jan. Thank you, and it's a privilege to be on Citizens Talk.
Thank you so much. AFRIFORUM, tell us a bit about the organization, what it stands for, and what it seeks to achieve.
So I'm guessing AFRIFORUM might be familiar to many of our viewers, but we are an organization, a civil rights organization, operating from a Christian and Afrikaner cultural perspective, but working towards a safe and prosperous and free South Africa for all people living in the country.
When was it established? And you say the focus is the Afrikaners with Christian beliefs?
Yes. So AFRIFORUM was established in 2006, but as part of the broader solidarity movement. And the roots of the solidarity movement actually go back all the way to 1902 as the Mine Workers Union. And at the end of the previous century, the Mine Workers Union's name changed into Solidarity Trade Union. At which time Flip Boyce became head of the trade union, and he had a vision for changing the trade union into an entire movement of different institutions operating from the same cultural and cultural background, but working towards in different areas of civil society.
All right. I'll come back to more questions on the membership, given what you say is the focus on the Afrikaners and Christians. You mentioned Solidarity Group. What is the relationship between AFRIFORUM, Solidarity, Freedom Front Plus, Orania? Because often these are all used interchangeably, as if they all almost belong to the same group. What's AfriForum's relationship with those different entities?
So to clear it up a bit, what people get confused most of the time is actually the name Solidarity, the trade union or actually labor organization, and
Yeah.
the Solidarity movement, which is not the same thing. So this
Okay.
Solidarity movement is officially a trust, but basically a trust overseeing a range of more than 20 institutions, which includes the labor organization Solidarity and the civil rights organization AfriForum,
Yeah.
but also includes academia, the university, Soltech, the training college, and Help and a Hunt, welfare society, and such. Regarding the Freedom Front Plus, AfriForum or the Solidarity movement have no official ties with the Freedom Front Plus.
Okay.
I guess there's some alignment in views and some issues which we
shared interests.
shared interests.
Yeah.
But actually, part of AfriForum's core business is not being a political party, which immediately brings, in another sense, some distance between
some
us
separation
and the
between
Plus, but we have good relations in general. And then regarding Orania, also no official ties to the town of Orania. So there is a company called the Orania Ontwikkelingsmaatskappy, which we call WIM as in uncle in Afrikaans, but it means basically the Orania Development Company. And that company is part of the Solidarity movement, but that is something.
Oh, I see.
That is something in Orania, and for the girls of Orania, but the Orania movement and the town of Orania is not officially part, is in no way part of the Solidarity movement.
Okay, so will be part of the Solidarity group, just as AfriForum is.
Yes.
So that's where the relationship is, but not directly.
Yes. So in the Solidarity movement's broader strategy or vision for South Africa, we see Orania playing some role in the future of the Afrikaner culture and of South Africa in general, but that's not our sole focus. The focus of the Solidarity movement is not one general call to move to Orania or anything like that.
We'll come back to that in terms of where AfriForum sees a place like Orania playing a role in the future. So you are is a membership organization. Is it only Afrikaners who can join the movement?
So anybody can join the movement. The only criteria is actually that you have to pay a monthly membership fee to become part of AfriForum. And actually we take pride in the fact that we do not keep racial or ethnic statistics even of our members. If you would ask me how many black members do AfriForum have, I wouldn't know.
But you have black members, obviously.
I believe so, yes. And so the only catch there is we do not form our policies according to the members' views. So if
for what you stand for.
If you agree with what AfriForum stands for, and if you support our vision, then you can become a member, and you don't have to agree with absolutely everything, and we won't send you specific views which you have to subscribe to, but you can give your support for whatever reason you prefer.
That's an interesting model, because often members think, I will join and then I will influence what the policies are. But then that also begs the question, if it is not, the policies are not set by the members, who sets the policies for AfriForum?
So it was basically set by the founders of AfriForum. And it's set in a very organic way mostly, but the highest authority would be the board of directors at the moment, but also with input from the Solidarity Movement Trust. And
the trust. Who appoints the board of directors?
I can't give a full answer to that.
Yeah,
I'm not even
but it's not
aware
a
to the
vote
detail.
by members. So
No,
it's-
not a
okay.
vote by
So there is
members,
no
yes.
voting. It is this
No.
is our proposition. You buy into it and you
Yes.
join.
Yes.
Okay.
That is
No, that makes
exactly the
sense.
case. And I can also perhaps add to that there's some sense in which you are not the members don't steer the organization, but there's also no single large funder
Yeah.
steering the organization. So
Yeah.
AfriForum is for the most part funded by small membership contribution fees,
Yeah.
and there's no single person or company who can say we contributing like half your income. You have to
Yeah.
follow our views. So in that way we try to find a balance, and I'm quite convinced that AfriForum has stayed true to the same vision from the beginning.
What's the size of the membership at the moment, and is it one standard membership fee, and how much is it?
Yeah, so there's a minimum membership fee. It gets updated each year. I might be wrong, but it's somewhere between 50 and 100 rands.
Okay.
And but anyone is free to contribute more than that.
Okay.
And then also businesses or even churches can become members of AfriForum, but for the most part it's individual members who make small contributions. And we also find that often there's only one member per household. It's for the most time.
Okay.
That's
and so, but the average fee, do you have a sense of that per member?
Yeah, something just above 100 rand.
About then what is the size of the membership?
Sorry, I forgot to mention that it's just above 315,000.
Yeah, 315,000.
Yes,
that's a lot of money. That's more than 31 million a month.
Okay, if your maths is correct, but I think if you keep in mind all the branches
of course, there's quite a lot of machine to run. I'm not even in any way suggesting that anyone is. I'm just saying that's money that can be applied towards good causes, of course, because one of the things we have been struggling with is to get more South Africans to actually contribute, donate or pay a membership towards a cause. And it's really inspiring that you've got people who are committed to making a contribution every month. So when you speak to your members and when you ask them why they join, so what do they say? So why do they join AfriForum, and what is your focus?
So there's actually various different reasons why people join, and it differs from some people first get involved in a neighborhood watch, and they like the idea of improving community safety, and then they become part of AfriForum, and then at the later stage become part of some cultural project or something different from the original community safety angle which they joined from. But some others just stay part of the neighborhood watch and is not that involved in the rest of AfriForum. And then other people through branches, perhaps they saw AfriForum fixing potholes in their street and decided I'd like to join this. And then some others for some of the bigger campaigns, they are worried about, say, expropriation without compensation, and then say AfriForum is fighting against this. I would like to support them. So
we'll come back to some of those discussions, expropriation without compensation and all of that. And on the membership, and I will tie it to the comment you made earlier about the future role of Orania, which I think the link there is, correct me if I'm wrong, Orania is also mainly about the Afrikaners, and similarly AfriForum is about that. The website at least says that. Why just the African? So is that tribal? I mean, what?
So regarding the question of why,
primarily the focus is
So just on that, I think the answer might differ between Orania and AfriForum on the question of why.
More AfriForum,
So on AfriForum's side, So I prefer to approach it from the angle of also the simply the heritage, and
Yes.
part of that Afrikaner Christian heritage
Yeah.
is we. I like to quote the Church Father Augustine, who said, "Every Christian should order his affections,"
Yes.
meaning you have some love towards your parents, but
Yeah.
also towards your community, and
Yeah.
some towards your nation, some towards the language you
Yeah.
speak, and whatever. So, in that sense, the fact that AfriForum's focus is on Afrikaners is not to, we weren't, or the founders of AfriForum weren't sitting around a table saying, what can we exclude? They were simply saying, what is this focus going to be? And AfriForum members are still, for the most part, we believe, proud South African citizens. Many Afrikaans speakers or speakers of another language. So that
I've got nothing against tribes, right? Because I actually think human beings, by their own nature, we either belong to various tribes, some of it by birth. I'm Jan, I'm Betty, I am male, I am South African. All of those are some form of tribe. So I actually have got nothing against that. It's what we choose.
If I might add there, so I think AfriForum would take issue with the word tribalism, because that can easily be interpreted as an all-encompassing worldview. I view the entire world through the lens of
the tribe.
And that's not what AfriForum does, but we do acknowledge the very real existence of tribes in South Africa.
But the tribe, I mean, especially the Afrikaans tribe, right? It's tribes change, right? So the history of the Afrikaners in South Africa is, interestingly, no one got here as an African.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So in itself, the Afrikaners as a culture is an amalgamation of stuff. So it is actually created by this amalgamation of various things, right? So the language itself starts with an attempt by people from various cultures and backgrounds trying to talk to each other, called compare style for a bit until it formalized into Afrikaans. So I would argue that Afrikaans is itself an outcome of change and evolution that should continue to, embrace others. Given that no one got here as an Afrikaner, what would be your view?
Yes, so we would say that although there's various origins of Afrikaans, it is a completely new language and people that birthed in Africa. And that even though there's many similarities still between Afrikaans and Dutch, and,
absolutely,
other
some
languages,
elements of French,
also it's not just, you can't just put them together and let it stay the same and then you have Afrikaans. And also there was no specific mission by some people to say we want to create a new people or a new language. And in the same sense, AfriForum will stay part of the Afrikaner people, but we're not on a mission to direct the course of the culture overall, or say we want to create some new language or whatever.
Absolutely, because I'm saying, I mean, the whole culture is a result of integration. So then, which begs the question, why would you aim to segregate it if actually the development and evolution of it itself came out of integration? Is a perfect case of assimilation. So I'm here, I come from wherever, but I'm actually able to fit in and build a new life where I am. And therefore, I'd argue that actually Afrikaners should be a lot more embracing of integration than trying to create groups that only serve that interest group.
So we stand for individual and community freedom, meaning that we leave it free to each family. If there is some family or individual saying, I love different cultures in South Africa, I I'm completely comfortable staying in a neighborhood with majority people who were born in another culture than myself, then we absolutely won't make any move against that. But if there's another family who say we're more comfortable living in a neighborhood that's majority Afrikaans speaking, there's no reason to force
them to. And I guess that's true of any other grouping of people.
Yes, exactly.
And so my hobby is really in human behavior and study anthropology and all of that. And one of the things, because often the questions around race come up, right? So, but if you go into studies of how human beings evolve, so there's big difference between racial bias and racism, right? Without complicating the distinction between the two, there are a lot of things that have got a racial bias, but they are not necessarily racist. So and I guess that's where I would like to go before we go into the rest of the issues around land and all of that. When you say you've got an organization focused on Afrikaners, now clearly Afrikaners does, even though they are part of white in South Africa, by categorization, Afrikaners does not mean cover all whites.
Yes.
Right. So it's a subculture in that.
Yes.
But I still say it has racial elements in the sense that I can never be considered part of the Afrikaner. So is that a racial bias?
So AfriForum always has a preference of rather looking at the cultural differences than the racial differences. And saying it's too easy for many politicians or cheap commentators to say simply whites there and blacks there, or this is a white thing and a black thing, and we're saying it's way more complex than that. And does race play some role? Absolutely, on a visual sense, as you've said. But so for the most part, AfriForum only evaluates South Africans on their culture, their language, and not the color of their skin.
But is that a genuine difference? I mean, so I'm black, and part of what defines me is the amount of, I guess, melanin, and I can go specify that as a criteria that I am focused on people with a certain level of melanin, but that like simply translates to black.
Yes.
Right. So I'm saying, and I'm glad you've clarified the separation between AfriForum and Orania. But if I look at the criteria of Orania, and you are not here to represent Orania, right? I'm saying you don't have to say white to mean white, because when I look at these things, for me to tick these boxes, it just means white.
Okay, so I can say that. So as I've already mentioned, to become an AfriForum member, no details need to be filled in regarding your race.
No, but the website specifically says focus on Afrikaners.
Yes. But so if you want to look at Orania and who can become a resident of Orania, so the definition is also cultural and not ethnic. And so you can absolutely be a white English-speaking person and not a Christian, and then you will not be allowed to stay in Orania. You won't be able.
But
to
I can't
say,
be black and ever qualify, because culturally, so the culture already excludes all black people, basically. Because it says Afrikaner.
In a natural sense. So if you associate with Afrikaner culture, if you speak Afrikaans in your home, and you, I don't know, eat and
I can make it into Orania.
You'll be able to make it into Orania. So I don't know the details about that.
I've looked at the criteria. I just don't see how any. I mean, I don't know if you know. Are there any black people in Orania?
Not that I know of. So I can't.
You said, I guess the reason I'm dwelling on this, you said AfriForum identifies with some elements of Orania and see it as kind of like part of the future.
Yes.
What specifically about, what is really a segregation type, in my view, because it does not allow a lot of people to qualify to be, residents of Orania. What resonates with AfriForum in relation to Orania?
Well, I think to start it from this angle, the main difference between Orania and mere racial segregation is the fact of making use of own labor and saying during apartheid there was it was quite easy to be part of a white family and have black people,
black labor,
black labor, and in Orania that's not an option. So AfriForum does not in each neighborhood branch or what operate on that principle, but we do see that as a positive, the entire mindset of doing the work yourself and never saying this work is beneath me, I won't do this, I need to get someone poorer.
So you like AfriForum likes that principle,
yes,
but not necessarily Orania as a geographical area.
Yes, so AfriForum is aware of the demographic realities in South Africa, and we are aware of the fact that if you are the only family of your culture in some neighborhood, there will be certain interests that is more difficult for you to have represented or to live out. And so in many areas we'd ask who's your neighbors and what are your cultural relationship with them as well. But we're not, as I've said, we're not calling on all AfriForum members to move to Orania or to create a similar place.
Areas. It's more the principles. And I mean, Orania, if I understand it well, is a private property. So actually have got, it's not like it is a town. It's on essentially a private farm owned by a company.
Yes, as I've said, I'm not up to speed on the technicalities of their official position.
But well, I mean, AfriForum could easily just be, clearly come out and say we are for everyone in South Africa. Is AfriForum racist?
No, AfriForum is not racist, and there's some way. If let me state it this way: if you want to do some project with your family and say the Mokhanwa family wants to build this or that, or wants to go on holiday or whatever, and someone comes to you and tells you, but you're excluding the rest of your neighborhood. Then if you say, okay, I don't want to be excluding anybody, let's all come, then there's some aspects of the project that just can't continue.
No, absolutely.
So I think in the same sense that AfriForum is going for the main interests of Afrikaners, but where it is possible without interfering with our core business, to be to the benefit of other citizens, we're all open for that.
But I'm sure you'll understand the sensitivities. I mean, the example about a neighbor and Mokhanwa building a compound and all of that, it does not carry historic injustice connotations. The sensitivities to a place that is only for the Afrikaners, the only reason people are taking up an issue with it is we come from a very recent history, apartheid, colonization, and all of that. I don't think it can just be simply be compared to you can choose whether you want to include your neighbors or not, given the history of the country. What would you say to that?
Well, I would simply reply with my experience being an AfriForum employee and representing AfriForum in various places in society. And if I walk home from work, I stay close to offices, and I often walk home with an AfriForum shirt on. and if I meet people in the supermarket or whoever, the feedback I get is always positive. People would white and black and Afrikaans and English and whatever language speakers would come to me, and in 99% of cases would present some compliment about AfriForum. So there's a complete split which we see between a commentary in the press and from politicians and
the people on the ground
actually experience on the street level.
And so let's talk to the heart of the issues that our target audience is asking us questions about. The issue of historic privilege that is in South Africa spoken about as along the racial lines, right? What is AfriForum's position on, just the historic injustice and what can be done, because the consequences of some of those injustices continue to be felt today. Is there a position by AfriForum on this?
So the AfriForum's official position is this: that AfriForum is opposed to discrimination in the past as well as in the present. And then by extension as well as in the future. So saying that you can't fix injustice from the past by instituting opposite injustice in the present. That's no solution. And the next thing I would add from personal experience is if someone asks me about apartheid, the first emotion or the first thought that comes to my mind is simply distance. Because I was born in 1999. And apartheid officially, let's say, it ended in 1994, just to put a date to it. And if you ask what's the age of leaders in South Africa today, and it's not even 50 years. The highest positions are filled by people around 70 years of age. And then you would say even my parents weren't in a policy forming role during apartheid. So it's really some distance that I feel. And I do, and also not on street level, but in political narrative, it often feels as if young Afrikaners are treated as co-belligerents, as people part of apartheid. So and it's some people would say they don't believe us if we say we're against all kinds of injustice. But I can simply be honest about it and say, even if for some reason, although that's not the AfriForum policy, even if for some reason Afrikaners would be in control of South Africa by tomorrow, AfriForum's position won't be, let's switch the policies around and say now we give preference to whites for positions for jobs or for whatever, or we would simply say based on merit, based on competence, and not on skin color.
So I mean, an alternative view will be what happened in 94 is that blacks were allowed to vote, right? That does not suggest the end of apartheid. So you will know that from the literature on apartheid, there was grand apartheid and there was so-called petty apartheid. Petty apartheid is, can you go to the same beach and can you whatever? Can you date across race and all of that? Clearly that has stopped. There are not many places where it will say, whites only or blacks only and all of that. But literature has correctly called that petty apartheid, right? So the biggest impact of apartheid has been called the so-called grand apartheid or systemic apartheid, and a lot of people will differ on the basis of whether that has ended at all. So they will look at things like land ownership patterns. They will look at things like transformation in the corporate world. They will look at spatial amenities and facilities. They will look at opportunities presented to children and all of that, right? So today, still in South Africa, it depends on where you are born, which largely follows. I have got no doubt that you were not part of apartheid in any way, and I wasn't, and whatever. But the consequences of that, because I think that's what South Africa is grappling with. What do we do with the consequences of that so that we can move on? Now, the view that just says, there's multiple alternatives. The one is, whatever has happened has happened. We'll bring back when we talk about land and all of that. And then, but the question then becomes, so what? Not because of the petty apartheid, but the consequences of the grand or systemic, right, apartheid. So I'll bring it back to as a direct question. The other thing I want to say is that, and I've been saying this to people so many times, that the idea that merit, right? So statistically, so let's say there are 100 people in South Africa, and 90 of them are black, 10 of them are white. Let's say the level of competence in the white is 80%, right? That 80% of 10 is 8, right? And let's say the level of competence among black people is 20%. I really want to make it so far apart, right? 20% of 90 is 18, right? So that level of competence by race should not yield an outcome where 70% of the senior executives in a corporate are white. Okay. Because the numbers don't work that way, right?
Yes. So I think to start it off, if AfriForum's position on, let's say, the ideal society is not simply an equal society, a society with equity on every level, but rather a free society. And as soon as you have freedom, there will be some kinds of inequality. And in various instances, it's not inequality in the way that one is rich and another is poor, but simply inequality in some person prefers city life and another person countryside, and there's not the one better than the other, but it's also not equal in a full sense. So in that sense, you can't reason about this and then start at why is everything not perfectly equal, and the same goes for competence. I would say competence in what? Competence at dancing, then definitely not the white people who's more competent. So it depends on how you look at that. And the next thing to add is also that I believe corrupt politicians have played a huge role in preventing equality and upliftment of black communities. And also, if from an Afrikaner perspective, one should ask, should Afrikaners into eternity bear the policy that only benefits black politicians and elites? And I don't feel that's fair in any way.
Absolutely. I mean, I haven't, just like I was asking questions about a tribal arrangement. So I equally, because Black Management Forum is it's a black, it says in the name, Black Business Council and all of that. So, and I've always said to people, if you are going to argue against an organization by virtue of representing as particular interest groups, I mean, come on, be consistent, right? So I'm not here in the let's bash AfriForum because it's focused on the Afrikaner. The thing I am trying to bring forth here is that, you see, if we are starting from scratch, because I think what South Africa is grappling with is, yes, we are prepared to compete for opportunities on an equal basis. No one is arguing for equality in that sense. That says you are always going to be 9 accountants are going to be black, 10 are one is going to be white. But what they're saying is, we are not starting at the same point. So if we are going to be running a race for 400 meters and someone starts at 300, I start at 0. How do we deal the inequality, not of outcomes, but inequality of opportunities? And that's why I'm asking the question, what is AfriForum's view on solving for that? Because it is true that there is generational benefit that is a function of where we come from as a country.
Yes. So first on, you mentioned there's no one arguing for 9 out of 10. What was it? Accountants should be black.
I'll come back to quotas.
And I think unfortunately there are some people arguing for that. And I'm glad you are not. But so there's also a problem with quotas or with benefits based on race. In the sense that it disincentivizes taking responsibility. And in the end, what might happen is if just hypothetically a black person is guaranteed some position as an accountant or a lawyer or whatever, it might incentivize the attitude of, I don't have to compete, I will receive it. And if the white people in this scenario are all hyper competitive, what's actually going to happen is the starting point is going to get further apart and not closer to each other.
Absolutely. But that is not borne by history, isn't it, Louis? So, I mean, we are talking about, it's not a theoretical construct, right? The taking over by the Afrikaners fully really happens in 1948, driven largely by the farmer community, right? So things that we are talking about now, including affirmative action, economic empowerment, in fact, if you go back to what the Afrikaners did post 1948, it makes what is happening today actually a Sunday picnic. I am not arguing that we should go back there, but it was clear Afrikaans nationalism, empowerment, including the focus on absorbing, you'll know about things like so-called the white problem, that a commission was appointed to say, we cannot have poor white problem, right? So I am not saying we need to go back to the same solutions. What I am saying is the consequences of a group of leaders focused on uplifting a particular subgroup of white, those consequences have not suddenly been reversed. The other thing I wanted to say is that, because my background is corporate, right? Many jobs in South Africa are not rocket science. People make it sound like actually a lot of jobs, including executive jobs, are so complex that you should be struggling to find people. That's actually not true. And I'm if there is a trade that takes 30, 40 years to learn, sure, we should continue to rely on people who've got that amount of experience. But that is not true of most jobs in South Africa. So the question still remains, this historic privilege and prejudice, depending on which side you are. My worry is when groups like AfriForum sounds like, no, but let's just cut it here and move on. But we can't just cut it here and move on, because the consequences of it today, the reason why Soweto is outside where it is, and I'm not saying that AfriForum must solve for that. Spatial planning has to be done by government, right? But what I'm saying is we're going to need everyone in South Africa to say, we acknowledge and see the historical injustice, and this is our view on what can be done to close that historic gap. And I'm trying to understand, what is AfriForum's position on dealing that historic injustice gap?
Okay, so first of all, AfriForum does, of course, acknowledge that the historic realities influenced what is happening today.
Absolutely.
And I think the complexity of the issue is that, or to add to that, that even though the historic realities influence what we experience today, the historic realities does not determine our principles of justice and injustice all by itself. And there's lots of other things to add to that. One would simply be demographics and birth rates. Well, say in 1948, your example of 90% and 10% would not have worked.
Oh,
it
no,
simply
absolutely
was not the case. And so many issues that make it much more complex.
But is the solution? I get it.
So I guess we're talking together about the solution. And we're absolutely open to that. And
I'm not saying AfriForum has figured out the solution. By the way, the purpose of this Citizens Talk is to shape each other's views, but ultimately start to say, okay, what can be done so that the sooner South Africa goes past this? Because I've got children. You look still young. I don't know if you've got children yet, but this thing cannot be carried over to next generation. At some point, we're going to have to carry it somewhere.
Yes. So I think in some cases it might seem as if AfriForum is not thinking about the complex issues or the solutions, because in many cases the injustice we are fighting against is so big and so obvious that part of that conversation is usually not what if everyone agrees on 90% and then we work towards the solution in the final 10%. Say if we are suing a corrupt politician, it's often a case of the corruption is so obvious and so large that if AfriForum is only making one loud noise and it's saying stop this corruption, then it's not because we're not thinking about solutions on the complex
but you
issues.
haven't yet positioned those as this is what can be. I guess that's what I was asking. I was just asking if there have been positions by AfriForum with proposals on how to deal this historic injustice. So that's really where I was going. And if AfriForum has not yet got to that, that's fine.
So I can I think the closest thing coming to that would be the intercultural cooperation of AfriForum. So we have a wing or a department of AfriForum called Intercultural Cooperation, led by Barend Uys, and that they specifically focus on reaching out to communities of different cultures in South Africa. And so one example would be the Barulong community, who AfriForum have a joint agricultural operation going on with, and things like that. So that's not an answer to
everything, and of course it's not going to solve everything, but there's some steps being taken.
And so the principle going across the board, and which AfriForum would like to see for large scale solutions as well, is through community freedom and through less state dependence and through the taking up of personal responsibility.
We'll come to some of those less state dependence, because I mean essentially that's why we formed Citizens, right? So and why we said we will focus on professionals and the youth, which over time we can expand. I guess we are all trying to figure out how do we define new tribes that don't follow the historic, because we seem to be held to ransom by these historical lines that we can't come out of. But that is going to require us to have the difficult conversation that says we cannot just ignore history, but it is going to be conversations like this that over time will get us to define the new South African, right? So the difficult conversation, I want to touch on this thing of quotas, because I gave the example of 9 and 10, right? So this has been said about democracy. It says democracy is a terrible system except when compared to other systems, I hate quotas. I hate the fact that you need to get to a point where you need quotas. What I'm struggling with is there's also no great history of a group of people having offered or having forgone privileges voluntarily, right? So when we all start from scratch, there shouldn't be quotas. But when you are walking into a set and there's already injustice, I mean, if you think about the affirmative action and labor laws, I don't know if many people know this. Actually, for a long time, the labor laws were not compulsory. They were, as an organization, go and set your own targets. And then we will then say, come and report to the Department of Labor on how you're doing against your own set targets. South Africans believe that for a very long time they've been forced quotas. That's actually not true, right? Organizations, big corporates, especially the big listed entities, then most of them consistently miss their own targets. And the penalty for missing those targets will be something like, I don't know, 5 million rand. And for many of these corporates, that cost is actually a rounding error in many of their numbers, right? So I'd argue that the government tried a softer approach to say, guys, we need to see a change. We need to see integration. That has not happened voluntarily. So as much as I hate quotas, when you are left with no option because voluntary change has not happened, you end up with quotas.
So to put it simply, we disagree with the position that even with existing injustice or historic injustice, that one simply has to have quotas. And
what are the options?
And the options is simply freedom, and that is what we are advocating. And we are saying that, and I guess there's no cold hard fact way to measure this, but you can take my word for it. If the position was switched around, AfriForum would not be advocating for quotas for whites.
But that's not in line with human behavior, Louis. So you work for AfriForum. How did you know about the role? Chances are, and you might... How did you know about the role? Chances are you heard about the role from someone you know, right? That's actually what happens in society, right? What happens in society is actually people become aware of opportunities through those they know. There are still people who go and apply for jobs, and because it's just right? Psychology, this part of psychology is not in dispute. People like those who are like them. That is not just for AfriForum. That is also for me. This is why it has been called unconscious bias. We will continue to find favor or like those who are like us. So to leave it to human beings to just say voluntarily when you already changed this, that has not happened throughout history.
I think it has happened in the sense that it sometimes literally takes ages, but there are cultures which, if you go back 200 years, was for the most part a poor community who has been uplifted by their own labor and their own efforts, and it's just too simple to say to put a tag on skin color and say we just need to have quotas in this country.
I get that we may not. Remember, I keep on saying, I don't think we should need quotas. But I'm saying we have a complex history that is along racial lines, right? I think, and I'm not even saying this is the perfect solution. I'm saying until we grapple with this thing, instead of maybe we should not sweep it away, right? I don't know what the perfect solution is. Maybe there is not even a perfect solution. All I'm saying is, in instances where it has been left to people, people continue to choose those that are like them. This is not just a white statement. It's equally a black statement, right? It's a human statement.
Yes.
Right?
So to take the example or the statement regarding democracy, which you know, the quote actually, to say in South Africa in 2024, not having any sort of quotas is really a bad position, but it's better than all the other options. And
that's our argument.
So I agree with that. That AfriForum is not saying that when we get rid of all quotas or all kinds of BEE, then things will immediately be perfect, or then all problems will be solved.
Absolutely.
But we will say that's an
not
improvement on the current position.
Absolutely. So the land question.
Yes.
What is again within the context of the historical land dispositions 1913? What is AfriForum's position? And of course, the current ownership patterns, the vacant land of government. I understand all of those arguments. I've had views like, let's first start with government dealing the empty land, but let's assume that we will have a competent government one day that will deal that, right? And we still are left with land ownership patterns that are still by historical racial lines, right? What is AfriForum's position on land and the whole concept of expropriation? That is part of the political debate at the moment.
So AfriForum holds in high esteem private property rights, and saying that where possible, or in all cases, that private exchange of property by willing buyers and willing sellers should take place. And also you've mentioned vacant government property, and I think it's something like 30 million hectares or something, a really large pieces of land owned by the government, which and government should not simply say, okay, this is for the use of black people or previously disadvantaged. They should say,
for
this
South
person Jan staying here, you should receive the title deed, and have private property ownership, and in that way to uplift communities and to in the end to enable people to competitively buy land and not simply receive a house to stay in on land owned by government.
But how do you deal the pockets of land that were not bought and were taken? I mean, they continue to run in, as I say, historic privilege. They continue to run in families. Because I mean, if you're kind of like first of all, the private property, I want to just touch on that because it features a lot in debates, right? Part of the problem is the concept of private property emerges somewhere around 17th century or 18th century, right? So in South Africa, or what we call South Africa, which actually starts with the Union in 1910, the problem is the arrival of Europeans found a country that did not have a large concept of private land. Land was
sorry, just to understand you, was the concept of private ownership not large among the Europeans or among the Africans?
No, in the Africans. Yes. That part of the problem with tracing the history is also that Africans moved a lot from. So the idea of land was, it is a communal, it's actually for everyone. So the idea of someone owning land was foreign at the time, right? So the Europeans come here and they come here with, of course, back in Europe, the concept of private ownership of land was already known. So what we ended up with in South Africa is, I believe we've got a combination of things. We've got land that was bought. We've got land that was, let's call it, donated, because you've had some mercenaries, for example, who fought on the side of the natives who were given land, right? But we also have got a large component of dispossessed land, right? No one paid for it. So, and I think the others are easier to deal with. The issue is, how do you separate the different? But we have a history of dispossession of land. So, how do we deal with that? Is it just a matter? Because we can argue that was conquest. We came, we conquered the land, make peace with it, let's move on. Is that the AfriForum position?
No. So well, first, this is just a side comment perhaps, but regarding the Union of South Africa, I think it's important also to note that is specifically not an Afrikaner construct, but
the British
imperial construct. So in a way, in 1948, Afrikaners basically inherited that, and by
Yeah,
that
yeah.
time it was
Yeah.
fixed.
Yeah.
And also, I think that's an interesting note, and it's not a point of disagreement, but
Yeah.
actually, even from Afrikaner history, if you go back to the first Boshoff person with my surname arriving in South Africa,
Yeah.
actually the majority of Boshoff generations did not live in what is called South Africa.
Yeah.
They either lived in the Cape or in Natal or in Transvaal or the Free State or whatever it was called then.
Yeah.
And then regarding the solution, I think actually there's some kind of natural solution happening in that. If I think about my own family and Afrikaners in general, actually Afrikaners are many out of their own choice leaving farms which have been in family possession for generations.
Yeah.
I think especially in areas where the Afrikaner population is shrinking. I think especially some areas in say the Eastern Cape, where 50, 60 years ago there was a thriving Afrikaner population and with Afrikaans schools and that simply doesn't exist anymore. And then out of their own choice, Afrikaners are moving away from there. And in many cases they aren't getting a highly competitive price for their land. So I think that's some way in which the solution is forming itself. And this is also AfriForum's official position, saying if for some reason AfriForum had to plan the borders of South Africa or had to plan this, AfriForum would not today have allocated such a large portion of land for Afrikaners.
Absolutely. But the consequences of that, I guess this is why I keep on going to historic. It's not because I don't want to move on, but I'm saying we are living with the consequence of that. You know, for example, our proposals as citizens is that where the government needs to expropriate land for whatever developmental purpose, that should be at cost, right? It is not at no compensation. We propose that it should be at cost. It's not a perfect answer, of course, but the thinking behind it is that land is essentially something we are holding today, not only for this generation but also for future generations. South Africa needs to continue to have the flexibility of what do they do, what do we all do with the land over time. But the idea that you will walk on, you know, the current occupant of land and just say goodbye also makes no sense. But our proposals of land as cost is to stop land being a speculative asset, so that the value of land comes from what you do with it and not from just owning the land itself. What would be your view on something like that?
So I think also that AfriForum is thinking about these issues, and we agree that these are difficult issues. But that's not going to be the newspaper headlines in AfriForum's court case against expropriation without compensation. If you only read the headlines, you might think, okay, AfriForum is simply saying, no, in any way, we don't want blacks to own any more land, or whatever may be the case. And I think the issue of expropriation without compensation in South Africa is mainly an issue of government versus citizens, and not an issue of historically privileged.
No, absolutely. So
and so in that, AfriForum would also say that expropriation with compensation is better than
absolutely. We are not even entertaining the concept of expropriation without compensation, because we're not even too sure what that.
But we even from AfriForum's side, we've been wondering in many cases, why is it the case that many people prefer financial compensation to the owning of land.
Yeah.
That there's been many cases of willing buyer, willing seller, and someone with a legitimate claim saying, my tribe or my family stayed on this land 120 years ago, and then when asked, when there's a perfect process in place, we find people saying, no, we'd prefer financial compensation, and then saying, okay, we need to make the policy, take the policy even further and say, no, now it needs to be expropriated without compensation, or government needs to coerce. That's simply not
absolutely.
the
I think so. The conversations are still largely immature in our view, because it goes back to my whole thing of petty apartheid versus grand apartheid and whatever. You said this. You said even when we look at the population mix, so we tend to want to judge kind of like history on the basis of 2024, right? But we are terrible at adjusting for time. At the time when some of this land dispositions happened, city life was not a big thing. Sandton City was not a big thing. So I would actually not look terribly at a person who chooses to take money versus the land, because the land does not represent the same thing it used to represent 100 years ago. You know, so I think we have to declutter that noise and start to say, given that this is something that we need to preserve, not just for this generation and for future generations, how do we ensure that everyone feels like you talk about farming, right? Like in reality, much of the Europeans who arrived here, not many of them were farmers. Actually, farming in South Africa is difficult, right? The locals were the farmers, but over time, through the assimilation I was talking about, so I'm trying to stay out of the, you said your family was here, then take the land, because that's also a function of the support by government. When 1948 happened, that was seen as a victory of the farmers. And where was the bias of the spending by government? It was on farming, right? It was on the farmers. That's historical fact, right? So to just say to a person, here is a piece of land you say your family used to own, good luck. But those are not AFRIFORUM issues or citizens issues. Those are ANC issues. But we really want to explore further this thing of expropriation at cost, as I say, with a view of saying, this should not be a speculative asset. No one should say, I'm buying land just to hold on to it, because it is a scarce resource that should continue to be available to not only the current generation and future generation.
Yes. So the difficulty with that is simply market complexity, that property prices are so, or the change in property prices are so complex.
Absolutely.
And in markets especially, that if you say at some point, to prevent speculation with land, let government step in and determine the prices, then
not even the cost is recorded, right? The cost of what you paid for the land, the government does not even have to come in. I mean, as you and I are speaking here, the biggest issue is foreigners are mopping up acres and acres of land. In fact, one of our proposals is a kind of moratorium, at least in the short term, of the foreign purchases of land, because that's another big commission of inquiry coming. Louis, I don't want to extend this too much further. If we need to have a follow-up discussion as we continue, because the interests are aligned, we are all just trying to figure out how do we make this South Africa, which is a home to all of us. I continue to be, when people use words like settlers and all of that to refer to fellow citizens, that's not only repulsive, it is disgusting. You can't be, we are fellow citizens. Some of us, maybe our natives came from up the continent, others came from Europe. We are talking about, I think, generation 7 or 8 of
Mhm.
Afrikaners this point
Mhm.
in time, for
Mhm.
anyone in South Africa to still be talking like this is some alien group, whatever,
Mhm.
we
Yes.
need to stop that.
Yes.
You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
so
Thank you.
we will continue
Mhm.
to have these conversations.
Mhm.
To wrap up,
Mhm.
what is top of mind today with AfriForum? We also know NHI is
Mhm.
being signed into law.
Mhm.
Anything you want to highlight that AfriForum is currently, dealing with, and then maybe just add on top of that what South Africans can
Mhm.
do wherever they are,
Mhm.
in the
Yes.
country to start to make a difference. Because the
Okay.
idea that someone is coming
Mhm.
to save the situation is not going to turn out to be true.
Yes. So yes, you mentioned NHI, and that's actually in my position in AfriForum, my main responsibility, the healthcare issues. So we are from AfriForum side going to oppose NHI simply from a fiscal realist position, saying
Yeah.
there's simply no money to enforce NHI or to
But as
implement
as a
NHI
model, as a
Mm.
system, you believe in it as AfriForum.
So
Because I
we
mean, this is
believe
the
in
UK has got some form of a
yes.
national.
So we would not like something like the UK system or
Or the US.
yeah. So the US is a difficult issue because they differ a lot between states. But
Yeah.
in any case, AfriForum is advocating for, as the Constitution states it, progressive realization of access to healthcare. And saying
What
that
does that mean? Progressive realization.
of
When again,
meaning that whatever policy can lead to more people being able to get
yeah,
access to healthcare services
yeah,
should be strived towards.
yeah,
And in South Africa, in the past, let's say 20 to 30 years, we've actually seen more success in this area in the private sector than in the
yeah,
public sector.
yeah.
And saying whatever policy should be enacted next, and not saying that it should ad infinitum be the
Yeah.
final policy, but saying
Yeah.
empower the
Yeah.
sectors that are effective at the
But
moment.
isn't the problem the ANC? Like the thing about South Africa, given where we are today, I sometimes struggle on whether we are discussing the policy or the terrible government of the
Yes,
ANC.
yes, yes.
And
I
I was
understand.
giving someone an example. I say nationalization of the central bank, right? Actually, South Africa is only one of less than 9 countries where the central bank has got private shareholders. So actually, it should be easier to argue why it should be owned by the people of South Africa. We are an exception to the norm, right? But the question then, almost immediately becomes: do you want to do that under the government of the ANC? So is this if that there are certain policies that outside of a very dysfunctional, corrupt ANC, some policies may be worth discussing, but it's difficult to discuss those policies under the current government.
Yes. So our experience at AfriForum is that one can really be astounded by what private citizens and organized communities can achieve without government aid.
Yeah.
So in many cases, even when you look at something in theory and say, wow, if a competent government could run this, then it would be wonderful. Our experience at AfriForum is even in those cases, oftentimes private citizens, organized communities are
so the
more
position
effective
is
than
same regardless of who is in government. I think
not totally regardless, but I don't think
it almost is also
one shouldn't depend on a competent government.
You cannot put your reliance on one day we will find a competent government.
Not. Okay. Yes.
And then South Africans, as I say, we said we like the AfriForum model largely because of the initiative taken by really individuals and groups, and of course over time supported by churches and other organizations. For a South African that's out there that's feeling like, this is depressing, I don't know what's happening next, what can they do?
Yes. So I think my main message would be getting back to ordering your affections and acknowledging I myself, as Louis Boshoff, I am part of the nation of South Africa and part of the language of Afrikaans speakers and part of the culture of Afrikaners and part of a company I work for and part of a church, part of a neighborhood, part of a family. And in South Africa, there is way too much emphasis on the race you are part of and the nation you are part of, and too little emphasis
but for
on
a reason, Louis.
The culture.
There's a reason those things stand out, because they are very much part of the fabric of where we come from. I understand we need to get over them at some point, but it's not like people just went randomly, you know, like, and I say this, that, you know, part of the Nazi Germany story is the Jewish, it was a race issue, right?
Yes.
Because the Jews were not seen as part of the dominant group there. But those two people, the two groups that had a racism issue in Europe, in South Africa, they are considered to be part of the same race. So no one plucked out of thin air the whole concept of race, except that it was the basis of injustice in South Africa. I don't think we should dismiss it. I think we should say, how do we get past it? And getting past it is going to require the trade-offs. But I'm going to let you have the final word.
Yes, so AfriForum's solution to this is by, in your personal capacity, placing more emphasis on your culture, your community, your church, or whatever. And
start to do something there,
and take part there. And in that way, that's getting back to the problem. But the one problem in South Africa is the ruling political party, or even saying parties, keep power by, or stay in power by focusing on race.
Absolutely.
If for some reason tomorrow all Zulu-speaking persons would say we don't support ANC anymore, and all Xhosa-speaking persons would say we go to another party, they would lose power.
And you seem to be going back there. I mean, we're talking about the dynamics even in the Western Cape going into these elections. What is the biggest game changer? Is the parties that are now talking to the colored vote. So this thing of race, actually, it seems like when we think we are making progress out of it, from it, we seem to be defaulting back to that.
So I think an argument could be made to say that the colored community in the Cape is not a racial community, but a cultural community, or perhaps both. So I think it's a little bit different, but I see what you're pointing at.
Louis, thank you very much for your time. I think the takeaway is that any South African, wherever they are, whatever grouping you are part of, you actually can start today to make a difference and start to have less and less dependence on government. There'll be elements that will continue. Unfortunately, we say this in Citizens. You might not be interested in politics, but politics is very much interested in you. So we all are going to have to grapple with this, because the systemic stuff, police, defense, tax system, and all of that, unfortunately, for a long time, they are going to be the space that is being run by government. But thank you very much for your time. To our viewers out there, subscribe, like, comment, share this. South Africa is going to be fixed by us having these debates. And the debates often are going to be from very different starting points and very different views. But until we can face each other as South Africans and have conversations around what we can, each one of us, do to build a better South Africa. Thanks for watching, and I hope you start to do your part wherever you are. See you in the next episode of Citizens Talk. Thanks, Louis.
Thank you.